part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
The 1-1 pitch. A swing and a drive to deep right. Away back. Goal!
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, John Telich, and we're going to kind of put this baby to rest for the season, whereas the Guardians finished up their schedule in the Motor City, did drop the final affair, and they finish up the year at 76 and 86, I believe it were. That would get you to your 162 games. Third place in the division, and obviously the big story this year, the end of the career, as it were, in Cleveland for one Terry Francona. And want to bring on the Senior Vice President of the Guardians, Mr. Bob Dibiasio, who's always been a great guest on this pod and is the voice for Guardians baseball in Northeast Ohio for so many years that you've been involved with the club. And Bobby, what kind of a reaction do you have just to how the season went in general before we talk more specifically about Tito?
Certainly disappointing, and thank you, John, for inviting me back once again. Always love when we have a chance to talk sports and specifically the Cleveland Guardians. Disappointing, frustrating season. Certainly thought coming off a 92-win season the year prior that, we were going to, get back and be a division leader and play October baseball. It's just not going to happen for us this year. You look back and see, okay, what were some of the things that happened to derail those goals? First and foremost, you hate using these things because they sound like excuses. They're not. Every team goes through injuries. But I think the first and foremost, you do need to talk about injuries about when you talk about the Guardians 2023 season. Our entire starting rotation goes down early. We really tax the depth of our farm system and the strength of this franchise, all the young pitching that we have. And you had three young guys and Logan Allen and Gavin Williams and especially Tanner Bybee come up and do remarkably well, kept us in the hunt all season long, but you had to keep an eye on the amount of work, how many innings that they pitched, because this was the first time those three gentlemen in a starting rotation pitching this intense. The intensity and amount of innings will be the most they've ever had in their careers. And so that taxes the bullpen. So the bullpen gets a little more inconsistent than it was because, teams aren't, the starters aren't getting to the 6th, 7th, and sometimes 8th inning. So there's domino effect to all of that, even though we are excited about those three starting pitchers, with Tristan McKenzie and Cal Quantrill and Shane Bieber coming back next year and Joey Cantillo in the minor leagues. I mean, our pitching's going to be fine. It just was one of those years. Secondly, we didn't hit the ball with runners in scoring position as well as we did a year ago. We seemed to get that big hit when we needed it. We didn't quite get that with regularity this year. So that caused inconsistencies on the offensive end. And then there was the curious case of Emmanuel Clase.
Yes.
Who ended up being the absolute number one closer in baseball, but also had the most blown saves. So how do you get 84, 85 saves over the last 2 years in baseball, being among the elite as closers in baseball, but then also struggled and had the most blown saves. So be interesting to see how all that transpires this offseason, what his workout regimen looks like. So all in all, frustrating. We did find some wonderful things out about this baseball team. So whoever our new manager is going to be, I think they're going to be happy with the team that they inherit.
Yeah, they're going to have an exciting young team, and obviously the pitching is going to be set up for them to really go to town with. I'm kind of excited about how that rotation can be, depending on even deals with Mr. Bieber, what happens with him, all that stuff. It's going to be fun to see how that all shakes out. Real quickly, go back to our buddy Clase. Some of that was that the new rules, probably early in the year. And then you did have many instances, it seemed to me, where it was that 10th inning deal and there's a guy on second base. Holy moly. And the guy comes around and scores. Kind of weird.
Yeah. Again, the inconsistency of our offense, John, created a whole lot of save situations where there wasn't a lot of margin for error. We were up by 1 run and you start an inning on the road with the guy on second and it turns into 1 or 2 runs. I always claim that the closer's role in Major League Baseball is without a doubt the hardest job in sports. I would love for someone to argue with me what they think. It would be great conversations at a sports bar over a cocktail is what's the hardest job in sports, because if you're a closer, your ball club has just fought for 2.5 hours to get a lead, and 1 pitch can affect the outcome of the game. 1 pitch. And you have to walk into that clubhouse and it's all quiet. You've been in those clubhouses when there's a win, the music's playing, everybody's feeling good. When you lose, there's no music, it's silent, and you have to walk in and then you have to go home. Then you have to sleep on what you just did, and you have to wake up and have amnesia and forget about it and come to the ballpark the next day with an incredible sense of confidence. And that takes a mental approach that is unique, I think, all athletes have to put yesterday behind them, but I think it's harder for a closer to do that. So again, the guys had 80 plus saves. The margin of error wasn't very large when he came into a ball game. And I think obviously we're in a pretty good position because we feel good about the fact that we have an elite closer in addition to a really solid starting rotation. Will we fix some of the bullpen? I think so. I think our guys will go and try to figure out, how do we fix our bullpen for next year?
Yeah.
The one thing exciting to me, John, is I think we found a catcher.
Yeah, and we're obviously talking about young Mr. Naylor, and it probably was a good scenario for him when he came in, when he was bumped up to the big leagues, the time in the season, and the amount of work that he was able to get in. Good to get that under his belt for 2023 and see how that bodes for the future, right?
Absolutely. To get as many at bats, to play in a divisional pennant race, the intensity of those ball games, commanding a pitching staff, trying to throw out runners, with the new rules, the larger bases, et cetera. There are more stolen bases this year than there has been in, I think, 30 years. I have to double check my stats on that, but the success rate certainly was heightened by the fact that the bases were larger, putting a lot more pressure on pitchers to hold runners. And those pitchers who aren't quite as adept at that put all the pressure on catchers. But this young man showed that he could command a pitching staff, as every young catcher will work on his release and getting the ball to second base, but his pitchers need to help him out in that regard. But he also showed tremendous power and ability to hit, an ability to run. This kid can steal bases and go first to third for a catcher. I think, former number 1 draft pick. So it's not surprising that this young man, Bo Naylor, has been able to, utilize his first taste of big league action and do well. So that was a huge question answered for us, that's a position that we don't have to worry about as we move into spring training in Goodyear here, not too far from now.
Yeah, not too far at all. It's always great to look ahead, and I think baseball really lends itself to that. And you can look ahead to next season as well, Bobby, with his big brother, Josh Naylor. I think he really solidified in the last couple of years that he can be a premier talent at the plate. And this year, being interrupted by, being on the disabled on the injury list for quite a while and coming back and still doing what he did. Really a delightful kid. Parents raised him well.
I'll tell you, those two kids are just, not only are they fun, they're just remarkably disciplined. They're focused. They're incredible professionals. The thing that we will talk about and look back on the 2023 season, we talked about the injuries and how the dominoes affected the bullpen and inconsistencies on offense. One of those major inconsistencies on offense was when Josh went down in the month of August. He was one of the hottest, if not the hottest hitter in baseball, and he goes down. And all of a sudden we struggle in the month of August, and the Twins played well. And all of a sudden there's that separator. I really wonder what our season would have been all about if Josh was able to play in the month of August. Because again, he was on fire. And when he's on fire, they have to pitch to Jose, who puts him on fire as well. The stats are remarkable when Naylor's batting behind him, what their two numbers look like. And when Naylor's not in the lineup at an extended period, Jose's numbers dip. So, he lengthens our lineup. He's a 100 RBI guy, power guy. An intense emotional competitor that's big in that clubhouse. He had one of those seasons where, this offseason, he feels real good about himself and is going to get after, working out, making sure the oblique muscle and such kind of injury doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. But another good season. So the Naylor brothers are anchors on this team.
Absolutely, and fun to watch them. It's great. It was really fun to watch Bo's development as that year went on. And we're going to talk at length here about Terry Francona, and I think it begs us to talk about the best player on his team, his example as a professional, to kind of also put into perspective the consistency that Terry Francona brought to his job over his 11 seasons. So Jose Ramirez. Is there anyone, Bobby, you've been with the organization for so many years, going back to the late 70s with that short stint in Atlanta, breaking it up a bit. Anyone as endearing, beloved as a player in this organization? I'm sure there are some that are the equal as Jose Ramirez, what he brings to this team.
I was curious after the mid-90s with the group of guys like Kenny and Sandy and Charlie and Carlos and Omar and, you can go on and on, who were absolutely adored. The adoration our fans had for that group of players who really, created the renaissance of baseball in Cleveland and our franchise, taking us to 2 World Series in 3 years and winning 5-6 divisional titles and, selling out 3.4 million seats year after year, setting the record back then of 455 consecutive sellouts, which had never happened before in the history of baseball. Did they sell out a season prior to opening day? Never, ever. So, baseball around 1900, the Yankees, the friendly confines of Wrigley or Fenway, never, ever did a team sell out prior to opening day until we did it 5 years in a row. It coincided with the Browns leaving town that left a fan base wondering what should we do. So there was a convergence of things that came together to create that most incredible, magical time. I think Jose is the first guy that you can really point to that is revered as much as Sandy Alomar as much as Kenny Lofton and Omar and Carlos in that group. So I agree with you. And he's taken that responsibility incredibly seriously. And we dedicated a field at Clark Field, the Jose Ramirez field, a field turf. Lincoln West High School is going to play on it. There'll be summer leagues played on it. Part of his committing to this franchise in his 7-year deal, when he was close to becoming a free agent, was that we were going to help build a ballpark in his hometown in Bonnie in the Dominican Republic, and also in Cleveland in his honor. It's, the Clark Fulton neighborhood is the largest Hispanic neighborhood in the state of Ohio. And to have the Jose Ramirez field there, working with the city of Cleveland and the Parks Division, absolutely gorgeous field. He was beaming with pride. They had the Lincoln West High School kids there, and number of his teammates showed up when we did the ribbon cutting, and just such a remarkable young man who, wasn't one of those automatic stars to be. He
Right.
was a little guy that just wanted it and worked hard, and he continues to work hard every day. And it's a marvel. You know him. He's a tiny guy. He's not Shohei Ohtani built. He's not a Mike Trout built, an Aaron Judge built. He's a little guy that puts the bat on the ball with authority, and has more extra base hits since 2017 than any big leaguer in all of baseball. And he's taken on, John, the mantle of being a leader of that clubhouse. And I know Terry was incredibly appreciative of his entire time. I mean, Jose's only had one manager in his career, and that's Tito. So pretty lucky for him. And Tito appreciated the growth and development, especially on the leadership side of Jose Ramirez.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I think when Mr. X slides into the bass fishing chair at the dugout there that they built for Tito, he will feel very comforted by the fact that you've got one of the premier players in Major League Baseball, not only doing it every day and night, but being that example in the clubhouse. It's a perfect thing for Mr. X, whomever that is. We can guess from here to Kingdom Come about who it's going to be and throw out names. Yeah, who knows? Right now, at this point,
well, Chris and Journey may know.
They may know.
They may be the only ones, though.
Yeah, they're sitting at the card table. They got their cards close in hand. We'll see what happens with that. Well, we're talking about one beloved individual in Indians/Guardians history to another. We're going to come back with Bob Dibiasio of the Guardians and talk about the great Terry Francona. But first, this break on the Press Play Podcast Network.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tybus Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tybus, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
We are back with Bob Dibiasio, Senior Vice President of the Cleveland Guardians, talking before the break about the beloved guy, Mr. Jose Ramirez. And then now it's time to turn our attention to the man that occupied that chair for 11 seasons, the beloved Terry Francona. Bobby, you've worked with so many of the managers. Was Dave Garcia your first guy?
Well,
back in
actually,
the
Jeff Torborg. Yeah, I've been
Jeff
doing this
Torborg.
for I've been
Okay.
doing this for 45 years now in Major League Baseball. 44 with us and one as the PR chief in the Atlanta Braves. Chuck Tanner was the skipper. Ted Turner was the owner. Bobby Cox, the general manager that year. So I've had the honor to deal with, I think, 15 managers in my career, maybe 16 now. Tito, don't tell Mike Hargrove this, but Tito is at the top of the list. Grover's right behind him. Those two gentlemen. But my first manager in 1979 was Jeff Torborg, and I'm 22 years old, I think, 23 as the assistant PR director, only because there was two of us in the entire department. There was Harry Jones, the PR
Lofty
PR
title,
and me. Yeah. So, and then Jeff gets fired mid-season, and Dave Garcia takes over.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then Dave was our guy for a while. Loved him. One of the most special baseball men in the world. I am forever indebted to him, as he took a young kid and helped me, as did Dwayne Kuiper, our captain at that time, guided me and taught me how to navigate a big league clubhouse. Without those two guys, I don't think I'm doing this for 45 years. But Tito, because I knew him, obviously I knew his dad before I knew him. I knew his dad from, obviously, you and I growing up, and Tito being one of our heroes on the field to play in the 60s, as we are young guys just, getting into loving our beloved hometown baseball team. And then he'd come back for Equitable Old Timers games, and we'd utilize him for other alumni events, since they lived just a couple hours away in New Brighton, Pennsylvania. Then I get to know Tito and Junior, Terry, and Terry plays for us in '88, and then comes and works for us in the front office, and then goes on to an incredible managerial career, not so much with Philadelphia, as he'll tell you, 4 losing seasons, and then obviously what he brought to Boston. But when he came to us, John, in 2013, we had a 24-game turnaround from 2012 to 2013. The 24-win turnaround was the largest margin of wins in the history of our franchise. So the fall of 2012, he automatically brought a credibility to our baseball operations inside that clubhouse. Players wanted to come here. They wanted to play hard for him. They were incredibly excited that we had a winning, experienced manager. Those of us on the inside knew we had the most unique set of circumstances, that a guy who, had a lifetime connection to this city and to this franchise because of his dad, in addition to being an experienced winning manager. And then that first year it took off. We're going to miss him terribly. It's the right thing for him to do. I think everybody needs to understand that more than anything, that it's the right thing for him to do. He needs to go get healthy. He used the term, John, to me the other day, that he goes, I just need to go take a nap. 23 years as a big league manager beats up your brain, your heart, your
stress.
stomach. And then in addition to the physical ailments of, I think he said somewhere near 40 surgeries from his athletic career and beyond. This offseason, and next week, I think he's got shoulder surgery. I think it's next week, but soon he's got shoulder surgery and double hernia surgery. He needs to go get healthy and enjoy himself. And I know he's got one thing circled on his calendar, which he's never done in his life, is in the summertime, he's going to go do some fun things. He's going to go to Ballybunion with Eddie Leone. Remember Eddie, the old?
I remember Eddie Leone, yes.
So Eddie lives in Tucson, is a big realtor there, and they become very good friends. And Mike Paul and a couple other real close friends that he plays golf with and hangs out with. they're all going to Ballybunion now because Tito can go. So he's looking forward to doing those things when his shoulder gets healthy. And that's a good thing. He deserves to go take care of himself.
Yeah, he's put everybody in front of him, and I still remember his news conferences talking a couple of seasons ago when he was away from the ballpark, and he'd be in the apartment, and he would hear the fireworks, and then get the satellite TV would bring him why the fireworks were going off, and you could hear in his voice that, dang, he missed being with that team, and it's just such a part. It's going to be really difficult, I think, and I think deservedly so, Bobby, because he has just been so tied to that game of baseball. Gosh, I can remember, when he played. And again, a billion people have come through that clubhouse over the years I've covered and over the years that you obviously have been with the team. And I remember he had like 50, 60 games. He was a phenomenal college baseball player of the year, I believe, in college baseball. And then and he has his injuries and much documented all the surgeries and stuff that he's needed. And even recall when Mark Schrader and I went down to the Dominican Republic back in 95, 96 in the winter, he was one of the winter league managers for one of the 4 winter league teams there, and which was he was kind of like getting his feet more and more wet as far as that was concerned. And you knew that was the season, I believe, after a lot of folks don't know that he was the manager for Michael Jordan, right? Down in Birmingham in 94. What kind of stories has he told you off the cuff from dealing with Michael Jordan? Probably a little betting involved, I would imagine.
Well, there's 2 real quick stories I'll share with you that he shared with me about Michael Jordan. Well, 3 real quick ones. So he's in Birmingham as the manager of the AA team in Chicago, and he gets a call from the general manager of the White Sox saying, "Hey, we are sending you a new ball player. His name happens to be Michael Jordan." And he's like, "What?" And he goes, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yes, Michael is coming and he's going to play AA baseball." And they hit it off right away. He got to see on the inside, the inner circle, because they became friends, what an intense competitor Michael Jordan was to become one of the greatest athletes known to man. And so the first one is their first road trip. So he comes to Birmingham and they're on a homestand. And so they're getting out of the clubhouse and they walk out to the parking lot, and there's a couple Greyhound buses out in the parking lot. And Michael turns to Tito and he's like, "What are those?" And he goes, "That's our transportation." He goes, "Where are we going?" He goes, "Oh, it's only about a 5-6 hour drive to the next town." And he goes, "And we're going in those all the whole time?" And he said, "Yes." The next road trip, and he didn't tell anybody. They walk out of the ballpark, and there's these luxury buses for the players and one for him and Tito and the coaching staff, so that they could travel in style. And he called Reinsdorf, the owner of the White Sox and the Bulls, and said, "Hey, I'm doing this with my own money. I'm not riding a Greyhound bus to these other parks. I'm going to ride in style and treat these kids to something special while I'm here for this year." And hope, moving forward. So then they get to a minor league town. And as I understand it, Michael's people would secure a gym in whatever town they were at. And they'd also find some college basketball players that would challenge Michael, Tito, who was a great high school basketball player, in addition to being, as you said, the college player of the year at University of Arizona, winning them a college World Series, #1 draft pick of the Montreal Expos. So they're playing hoops in these little towns, and they'd set up games, and all of a sudden, obviously, word would get out hey, Michael's playing at the Y right now. And all of a sudden people would be flocking and sitting in the stands, and they'd get these games going where winner stays on. And so you don't beat Michael Jordan. So they're playing 6, 7 games. One game, Tito takes the last shot, misses. The other team comes down, hits a bucket. They win. Now Michael and Tito's group has to sit. And Michael kicks the ball to the rafters after Tito misses and they lose, and walks over to him and puts his finger in his chest and said, hey, remember this. I always take the last shot. And Tito said, hey, we're tired, man. We just played 7 in a row. I didn't really care if I made it or not because we got to go. We got a game tonight. We got to go. Get to the clubhouse, and I'm dogged tired. And he goes, well, you just can't take the last shot because I've seen what your shot looks like, and I always take the last shot. And as they're walking away, Tito turns to him and says, you know, when you look at me taking the shot, it's like me watching you try to hit a curveball. And he said Michael dropped to the floor and rolled around laughing like nobody's business. And that was the kind of relationship that they had. And they do still to this day. But he said it was remarkable to watch him because everybody wants a piece of him 24/7. And how he had to navigate that. He says, I can only imagine how he did that as he was winning MVPs and winning championships for the Bulls. Everybody wanted a piece of him every single minute of the day. And how do you handle that? He goes, it taught me to keep an eye on certain star athletes that I would hopefully eventually manage in the big leagues, because there's hangers on, there's solid business people talking to you that you need to be a part of. But then there's others who you need to keep at arm's length. He goes, in addition to being an elite performer and keeping that edge, he said, I learned so much from him in watching him go about his business on a daily basis. But Tito, the thing about Tito, there's so many things in 11 years, but one of the coolest things was the fact that no matter what kind of team he had, whether it was young, whether it was filled with a few superstars, whether it was a mix of young and veterans, he always found a way to win. He always found a way with his communication skills and his other leadership skills to find a way to make it fun. When people came to the ballpark, they always would come to the ballpark with a incredibly positive attitude because of the leader in that clubhouse. Just a remarkable guy that the game of baseball is going to miss.
Yeah, I think the game will miss him, and you know, and he was one of us as well. You know, I was speaking as a reporter slash person on the air because he did spend some time, you know, with ESPN. He kind of knew what the needs were for our job, Bob, and
Yes, he did.
and that was his job to know. It was always your job to know. All the years you dealt with the media who had different needs, and I can always remember whether it was a tough story, you were always up front and saying, you know, I understand your needs, so let's help you do your job. And I always appreciate that. And same thing for Terry. Terry was just great to deal with. And he brought an element of fun. I think the self-deprecation that he brought about with him to the ballpark, all those stories about, you know, lying in bed, eating food, and then falling asleep, and you know, having Doritos all over him or whatever the case may be.
Pizza or ice cream. Yeah.
Ice cream. He just, I always appreciated that. The fact that, and he knew, Bob, he knew when he was speaking to us, he was also in some ways, if his players were, had their wits about them, he was speaking to them as well, right? In many ways.
Absolutely. No question. Through the media, he would understand that his guys are listening. They're social media all over the place. They're young men who are all over social media. They all had their own, handles. So he knew that whatever he was saying would get back to every one of them, in addition to the things he would say to them personally or as a team. He wasn't huge on team meetings, and just had a couple in spring training, first day and then last day when the team that was going to jump on the plane and go begin the season. And then throughout the year, depending upon how the season's going, he would feel the need to chat with the group. But his ability to do three things as a leader or what make him a Hall of Fame manager and separate him. First and foremost, he, as you said, he was authentic. For him to share the stories about falling asleep in bed watching an NC2A basketball game and roll over and there's a pizza box next to him and his face is full of pepperoni or something. And he's just such a genuine, honest, humble guy, very authentic. If a leader is not authentic, tries to be somebody they're not, especially in sports, it doesn't work. The players will be the first one to see through, the falsehoods that are there. The one thing I think players loved about him, not only his communication skills, but the fact that he embraced individuality. He didn't care if you wore a chain or had blue hair. It didn't matter to him. You are who you are. And the reason you're sitting in that major league clubhouse is because there was something inside you that made you rise to be one of the elite baseball players on the planet. Why would I change that? But I'm going to make sure you understand basic fundamentals, that you better show up on time. You better give your best effort, which means you have to have good nutritional guidance. You need discipline. You need to practice hard. You need to get into the strength room, listen to the trainers and coaches, have a respect for the game. But that was it. His two basic rules, because he knew everything fell under that, were show up on time and give your best effort. And then lastly, service to others. Any real good leader realizes it isn't about them. Most leaders think it's about them instead of understanding it's about others. It's all about service to others. And man, did he care more about Tony Amato and the clubhouse guys, everybody in our service level, the players, the coaches. He cared about everybody else more than himself, which is why right now, for the first time, he needs to be selfish and go take care of himself. But for 23 years as a big league manager, he took care of a whole lot of people. Very special human being.
Yeah, I can imagine the day. Obviously, the day is going to come when he'll be on that stage in Cooperstown. And I would imagine, Bobby, you won't be very far from that, huh?
I fully expect to be in the audience, to be there, hopefully, get invited to be at the little party, whether it's going to be, organized by us, our franchise, or the Red Sox. That's an interesting, he won 2 World Series for them.
Yeah, right.
But his connection to us, I think, believe it or not, is stronger. Only he can tell you that. And I'm sure it's a difficult conversation for him to say out loud. So I don't know how he would answer it. But we will definitely be there and beaming with pride and with a huge smile, knowing that a man who has baseball in his DNA is being rewarded and honored at the highest level of our game, is a man that should be honored at the highest level of our game.
Absolutely. And you wouldn't want to miss that party where they'll ship in those hot dogs from New Brighton, right?
Exactly.
It's one of the goodies.
Him. After his father's funeral, the family, the limo has to drive by the little hot dog stand in New Brighton where they all grew up, having hot dogs for 60 cents. And as a 8-year-old kid, who knows how many hundreds of those he ate as a kid. But I think growing up in Western PA endeared him to people of Cleveland. Again, not only because his dad played here, but just those values that you grow up with in this region are pretty consistent with Western PA and Northeast Ohio. And we're all going to miss him every day. I talk to people. I think Hammy, our radio voice, and Tony Amato are probably the two that have a tear in their eye because they dealt with him on a daily basis. Especially Tony took care of him. It's not going to be easy. I should say it wasn't easy the last few days to say goodbye to him. So incredibly emotional. 11 years with one club. That's not doesn't happen very often. It's a rare thing in our business, and especially a guy that is so beloved like Terry.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Tony. If there is a Hall of Fame for clubbies, Tony Amato would be standing on that stage. He's absolutely the best. Well, this has been a great conversation about Terry. We all absolutely enjoyed his company. He was so good to me, so gracious. Anytime I needed an interview, he was just a super pro about everything. And I'm not the only guy saying that. Obviously, there's just all the writers and broadcasters, Hammy, media people, Bart, Curtis, you, everybody. He left heck of a mark. I wish him the best. And I'll leave you with one final question. If he heals up and he's healthy, do you even think there will be a possibility down the road that he'll want to scratch an itch to manage, or do you think he's done?
I don't know the answer to that. When he used the word nap to me, that he felt like he needed a nap, and one of my first thoughts was, well, when you wake up from a nap, will he be energized to dive right back into it?
Right.
Will he get that itch after experiencing being around his grandchildren? He lives in Tucson in the off season, and he's got grandchildren and family in Tucson. He's got his buddies. Like I said, he's going to Bally Bunyan. He likes to go play golf and hang out in Vegas once in a while because he loves to play the table games on occasion. And when he starts to live that life, because I can't imagine when the last time in the summer he's been free, probably since 8 years old. I don't know. He played Little League ball, and then, you play, baseball your whole life. So he's never really had a chance to have a summer to himself, and to go do things like go to Bally Bunyan. In the off season, he would, zip with the Eddie Leone and them to Hawaii for a few days, but had to get back because it was getting close to spring training. And so how much is he going to enjoy that freedom at this stage of his life? And realize that while he might have that itch, he made the right choice. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think it'll keep people guessing. But first and foremost, we wish him all the best to get healthy, be happy, enjoy your family, and just know that you left a job that you were so beloved by so many people. And I'm sure there are naysayers here and there. You didn't handle the bullpen, all that kind of stuff. But I just look at the results, Bobby. It's baseball. Yeah. I just look at the results and I see all the times in the playoffs and the World Series and stuff like that. And he goes down as the best that there could have been here in Northeast Ohio.
Longest tenured, winningest manager in our franchise history. And for him, how beautiful, as you know, in the world of sports, you were able to do it. You decided when it was time to walk away from your profession. How often does that happen for the head coach or a manager of a professional sports team? Not often. And so for Tito to be able to orchestrate that, I think that's what puts him in a real good sense of accomplishment, and is proud about what he had been able to accomplish in, a career that spanned almost 40 years in uniform, because he was able to call his shots at the end, which is incredibly rare.
It really is. Well, Bobby, always appreciate chatting with you. Thanks very much for hopping on the pod to talk about Tito and the guards. We're excited to see what happens in the next year as a new group comes in, and obviously a new skipper for the Cleveland Guardians. I'm excited to see how that process plays itself out. So once again, Bobby, thanks very much for joining me.
JT, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Hopefully we'll connect as we sit in Goodyear and look at what's going to hopefully be a real fun 2024 Guardians baseball season.
Fantastic. Bob Dibiasio, Senior Vice President of the Cleveland Guardians. I'm going to step away for just a half second, and I'll close up the show with you guys. Thanks for listening. So that's going to do it as far as this edition of the podcast is concerned. A few housekeeping items. Guys, in the leaders and categories for the Guardians this past season, as we mentioned when we started the show, finishing up at 76 and 86, third place in the American League Central, as those Tigers snuck past them in the latter stages of the season. Josh Naylor, your leading hitter on the team, with that 308 average, had a very good season, even despite the fact that he dealt with the oblique situation, as it were. Jose Ramirez, the leading man with power, with 24 home runs, and Naylor had 97 RBI, considering he lost so much time. Very productive at the plate. The youngster Tanner Bybee, with a 2.98 ERA, tops among the pitching staff, and Bybee, with his 10 wins, also getting the job done. But the offense, as Bobby alluded to, just not opportunistic in many instances as far as getting those hits when they needed them, and they were at 4.09 runs per game. That was 27th in Major League Baseball, so they have a lot of work to do to get better at that. They were at 313 for the on-base percentage. That's 23rd in the league. Slugging percentage 381, 29th in Major League Baseball. But we knew at the start of the year they would be an opportunistic team on the base paths, and that they would be among the better teams running the bases, and that certainly held true, as their 151 stolen bases, good for fifth best in the league, and their ERA pitching staff was 10th best, so that certainly can improve, and their amount of errors was right in the middle of the pack in terms of making those boo-boos every once in a while, so they have to get better. Yeah, they have to get better in a lot of areas, but there will be much to look forward to see what happens in the offseason, what happens with Shane Bieber, obviously who is going to be the next manager. A lot of things to get excited about as we look forward to the quote-unquote hot stove league. There's discussions in the cold winter months about how the team will be made up next year and what's to look forward to. One thing I didn't talk to Bobby about was obviously they are going through with the construction, or they're rehabbing the facility, changing up some parts, getting rid of those storage containers, as it were, up there in the upper decks, and making more areas where fans can congregate and enjoy a beverage or two or a snack, and move about the ballpark and enjoy themselves in the 2024 baseball season. And most assuredly, we'll be really keeping our eyes to the skies to see what the front office does as far as who is going to be the man to take over the managerial duties with the Cleveland Guardians. A lot of folks want to see Sandy Alomar get the job. I'm not certain how much Sandy's has that in his plans going forward. And of course, there's many candidates that have had small ties to the organization, but are not with the organization as we speak. I know Paul Hoynes put up a list of a bunch of names, not the least of whom was guys like Mike Napoli, who was a much beloved figure for the Cleveland Indians back in the day, as it were, and other names as well. So we'll keep our eyes to the skies. But as far as the regular podcasts here on the Press Play Podcast Network of the Guardians of the Land MLB Pod, we'll be kind of slowing things down to a halt, as it were. And then when something big happens, I'm sure we'll hop back on to the Press Play Podcast Network and give you a taste of what we feel is going on with the team or may be happening as well. And again, as always, I encourage you to check out some of the other pods that are on the Press Play Podcast Network. It is quite the bit of variety as far as the amounts of shows that we have with both football and basketball, baseball. We have movie pods and television viewing pods, you name it, a variety of stuff to listen to, a cornucopia, as it were, of podcasts on the Press Play Podcast Network. Thanks for listening, everybody. Look forward to talking to you the next time around on the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, John Telich, and I hope you have a fantastic day. See you, everybody.